The most powerful woman in the city broke down on a deserted highway. The man who stopped to help? He was supposed to be dead. And when Margaret Alston saw his face in the glow of her hazard lights, she realized that some ghosts don't stay buried. They come back with grease-stained hands and secrets that could destroy everything she'd built. Before continuing the story, please consider giving this video a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories to you. Margaret Alston didn't believe in fate. She believed in quarterly earnings, strategic acquisitions, and the cold precision of a perfectly executed board meeting. Which was why, standing on the shoulder of Highway 9 at 11:47 p.m., rain soaking through her Armani power suit, felt like a personal insult from the universe. Her car, a sleek black Mercedes worth more than most people earned in 5 years, sat steaming and useless behind her. The engine had died with a violent shudder 20 minutes ago, and her phone had exactly 3% battery and 0 signal. Margaret Alston, the woman who controlled boardrooms with a single glance, who made grown men stammer during negotiations, who had been called the Ice Queen by Forbes last month, was stranded. Alone. Vulnerable. She pressed her palm against her temple, trying to will away the tension headache that had been building since 4 o'clock. The board meeting had been a massacre. Richard Chin had come prepared with slides, accusations, and enough votes to make her sweat. The merger with Hartley Industries was hanging by a thread, and every vulture in that conference room could smell blood in the water. She'd won. Barely. By the skin of her teeth and the force of her reputation. But winning had cost her. It always did. Margaret had left the building at 11, her heels clicking against marble like gunshots, her assistant's concerned voice fading behind her. She'd needed air. Space. The illusion of control that came from driving too fast on an empty highway with the windows down and nothing but the hum of a German-engineered engine to keep her company. Except now the engine was dead, and the highway wasn't empty anymore. Headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the rain like knives. Margaret's spine straightened instinctively. She smoothed her wet hair back from her face, ignoring the way her hands trembled from cold. She told herself, only from cold, and stepped closer to her car. The hazard lights cast everything in rhythmic red shadows, making the night feel like a heartbeat. The approaching vehicle slowed. A dark SUV, expensive but not showy. Tinted windows that revealed nothing. Every self-defense article she'd ever skimmed flashed through her mind. Deserted highway. Late at night. Woman alone. This was how horror stories started. This was how successful CEOs ended up as cautionary tales on true crime podcasts. But what choice did she have? The SUV pulled onto the shoulder 20 feet behind her Mercedes. The engine idled for a moment, too long enough that Margaret's heart started hammering against her ribs, and then it cut off. The driver's door opened. And everything stopped. Because the man who stepped into the rain, his white shirt already clinging to broad shoulders, his tattooed forearms catching the red glow of her hazard lights, his face half-shadowed but unmistakable, was Joseph Gilbert. The boy from the docks who had kissed her under summer stars 10 years ago. The man who had disappeared without explanation, without goodbye, without mercy. The ghost she had spent a decade trying to forget. Except Joseph Gilbert wasn't a ghost anymore. He was something far more dangerous. Margaret knew that face. She had seen it 2 months ago on the news, blurred in the background of a federal investigation. Whispered about in the same breath as organized crime, laundered money, and bodies that never surfaced. Joseph Gilbert had become a mafia boss. And he was walking toward her car. Margaret. His voice was deeper now, rough with years and choices she couldn't imagine. He stopped 3 feet away, rain dripping from dark hair, eyes scanning her face like he was memorizing it all over again. Your engine's blown. Pop the hood. Not are you okay? Not what are you doing out here? Just an order. Calm. Certain. Terrifying in its simplicity. Margaret's throat tightened. She had a master's degree from Wharton, a corner office on the 40th floor, and a reputation for being unshakable. But standing in the rain, face to face with the man who had once held her heart and then crushed it, she felt 22 again. And she hated him for it. I don't need your help, she said, her voice cold enough to freeze the storm itself. Joseph's mouth curved, not quite a smile, not quite a threat. He moved past her without permission, flipped the hood latch from inside her car, and lifted it with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Yeah, he said quietly, leaning over the engine, his hands already moving with dangerous precision. You really do. And Margaret realized, with a sick drop in her stomach, that he wasn't just talking about the car. She should have walked away. Should have demanded he leave. Should have done anything except stand there watching him work, his shirt plastered to his back, his movements efficient and sure. But she couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything but stare at the way the rain caught in his hair, the way his jaw tightened when he found whatever he was looking for in the engine. How long since your last service? He asked, not looking up. That's none of your business. Radiator hose is shot. Coolant's everywhere. He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans, and finally met her eyes. When's the last time you let anyone take care of something for you, Margaret? The question hung between them like a blade. I take care of myself, she said. I can see that. His gaze traveled over her, the soaked suit, the ruined heels, the control she was clinging to by her fingernails. You're doing great. Something in her chest cracked. Don't what? Don't act like you know me. You gave up that right 10 years ago. Joseph's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like regret. Then his encrypted phone buzzed in his pocket, and whatever softness had been there vanished. He glanced at the screen. His jaw went tight. Get in the SUV, he said. Excuse me. Now, Margaret. And when she looked past him at the darkness beyond the highway, she saw them, headlights in the distance, moving fast, moving wrong. Coming straight for them. Margaret's world had always been built on certainty. Numbers didn't lie. Contracts held. Signatures meant something. But standing in the rain, staring at Joseph Gilbert's face, every certainty she'd constructed over the past decade crumbled like wet paper. I said get in the SUV. His voice had that edge now, the one that made her skin prickle with something between fear and recognition. I'm not going anywhere with you. Those headlights? He nodded toward the approaching vehicles, still distant but closing fast. They're not highway patrol. And they're not here to help. Margaret's pulse spiked. She'd spent 10 years learning to read people, to spot threats in quarterly reports and hostile takeovers. But this was different. This was Joseph's world, and she didn't know the language anymore. Why should I trust you? Something flickered across his face, pain, maybe, or its ghost. Because 10 years ago, I would have died for you. That part hasn't changed. The words hit her like a physical blow. She remembered that boy. The one who'd worked double shifts at the docks to take her to dinner. The one who'd looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. The one who'd vanished the day after he told her he loved her, leaving nothing but questions and a hole in her chest she'd filled with ambition and ice. You left, she said, hating how her voice cracked. You didn't even say goodbye. I know. That's it. I know. Rain streamed down her face, mixing with something that might have been tears if Margaret Alston ever cried. You destroyed me, Joseph. I waited for you. I called every hospital, every Margaret. His hand moved toward her, then stopped, hovering in the space between them like he'd forgotten he had the right to touch her. I will explain everything. But right now, you need to move. The headlights were closer now. Close enough that she could see there were two vehicles, both dark sedans, both moving with predatory intent. Her executive brain kicked in, the one that had saved her in 1,000 boardroom battles. Calculate the risk. Assess the variables. Joseph was dangerous, the news had made that clear. But the men in those cars? They were an unknown. And in business, you never bet on an unknown when you had even a fractionally better option. She ran for the SUV. Joseph was beside her in an instant, his hand on her back, guiding her to the passenger side. He wrenched the door open and practically lifted her inside, and for a split second, his hand lingered on her waist, exactly where it used to rest when they danced in his tiny apartment with music playing from a broken radio. Then he was gone, slamming her door and rounding to the driver's side with the fluid speed of someone used to running. The engine roared to life. Joseph threw the SUV into gear and pulled onto the highway just as the first sedan reached her abandoned Mercedes. Margaret twisted in her seat, watching through the rain-streaked rear window as men emerged from both vehicles. 4 of them. Maybe 5. Too far to see faces, but close enough to see guns. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Seatbelt," Joseph said calmly, his eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. "Who are they?" "People who don't like it when I deviate from my route." "Your route?" Margaret's voice pitched higher. "You mean you didn't just happen to know?" He cut the wheel hard, taking an exit ramp at a speed that made her stomach lurch. "I was 3 miles south when I got a call about a broken-down Mercedes. Black. Registered to Alston Industries." His jaw tightened. "I knew it was you before I ever saw your face." The implications crashed over her. "You've been watching me. Protecting you." "From what?" Joseph didn't answer. He was too busy navigating a series of back roads that Margaret didn't recognize, the SUV's tires screaming against wet pavement. The headlights behind them had multiplied. 3 sets now, maybe 4, all converging like wolves on a scent. Margaret's hands gripped the door handle. This morning she'd been worried about stock prices and merger clauses. Now she was in a high-speed chase with her ex-boyfriend, the Mafia boss, and men with guns. "This is insane," she said. "This is I'm sorry." Joseph's voice cut through her panic, quiet, and devastated. "I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I never explained. I'm sorry that loving you made you a target." The word hung in the air between them. Loving. Present tense. Margaret's breath caught. She turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time since he'd stepped out of the SUV. The boy she'd known had been lean and hungry, all sharp edges and beautiful dreams. This man was harder. Scarred. There was a thin white line along his jaw that hadn't been there before, and his knuckles were marked with the kind of damage that didn't come from fixing engines. But his eyes. God, his eyes were the same. Dark and intense, and looking at her like she was the only star in a collapsing universe. "You don't get to say that," she whispered. "Not after what you did." "I know. Stop saying that." Joseph took another turn, this one onto a dirt road that disappeared into dense woods. The headlights behind them fell back, confused or cautious. He slowed the SUV, navigating by memory through darkness that seemed absolute. "The night I left," he said finally, "my father was killed. Executed by his own people for trying to get out. They gave me a choice, take his place, or watch them kill my sister too." His hands tightened on the wheel. "So I took his place. And I disappeared. Because if they knew about you, Margaret, if they knew I loved you, they would have used me," she finished, her voice hollow. "They would have destroyed you. Just to make a point." The SUV rolled to a stop in a small clearing. Rain drummed on the roof. Somewhere in the distance, Margaret could hear the sedans searching, their engines growling through the storm. Joseph turned to face her fully, and in the dashboard's green glow, she could see everything he'd been carrying. 10 years of guilt. 10 years of watching from the shadows. 10 years of loving someone he couldn't have. "I became everything I hated," he said. "So you could stay everything I loved." And Margaret realized that the boy from the docks hadn't disappeared at all. He'd just become a monster to keep her safe. The clearing was silent except for the rain and Margaret's racing heartbeat. Joseph's confession hung between them like smoke, and she didn't know whether to scream at him or break down completely. She did neither. Margaret Alston hadn't built an empire by falling apart. "We can't stay here," Joseph said, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the windshield. "They'll widen their search grid." "But your car," he paused, something almost like a smile crossing his face. "I wasn't lying about the radiator hose. You're not going anywhere in that Mercedes." "So, what? I'm just supposed to disappear into the night with you?" Margaret's voice stripped ice. "Abandon a $300,000 vehicle on the side of the highway and hope my life doesn't completely implode by morning? Your life will definitely implode if those men find you. Because of you." She turned on him, all the fury she'd been suppressing for 10 years suddenly boiling over. "This is all because of you. I was fine. I was perfectly fine until you decided to play hero on a highway. You were stranded in a storm with no phone and no help coming. I would have managed." Like you managed after I left? The words came out sharper than he'd intended. Joseph's jaw clenched. I read about you, Margaret. Every article. Every award. The Ice Queen. The CEO who never sleeps. You call that fine? I call it successful, she snapped. I call it building something that matters. What do you call it, Joseph? Running criminal enterprises? Ordering hits? Or do you prefer the term waste management like the news does? His eyes flashed. You don't know anything about what I do. I know enough. I know you became exactly what your father was. The thing you swore you'd never, she stopped, the memory hitting her like cold water. They'd been on the docks, his arms around her, the summer air thick with salt and possibility. I'm getting out, he'd whispered. My dad's world, all of it. I'm going to be different. We're going to be different. Don't, Joseph said quietly, reading her face like he always could. Don't throw that night at me. Why not? You threw away every promise you made. To keep you alive. I didn't ask for that. Margaret's voice cracked. I didn't ask you to sacrifice yourself. I didn't ask you to decide what I could handle. You made the choice for both of us and left me with nothing. Joseph was quiet for a long moment. Rain hammered the roof. Somewhere in the distance, an engine revved and faded. You're right, he said finally. I should have told you. Should have given you the choice. He met her eyes. But I was 23 and terrified, and I loved you so much it felt like dying. So I chose wrong. I chose your safety over your happiness. How noble of you. It wasn't noble. It was selfish. His voice went rough. Because every day for 10 years, I got to know you were out there. Alive. Succeeding. I got to see your face in Forbes and Business Week and pretend, just for a second, that I was still the kind of man who deserved to stand next to you. Margaret's throat tightened. She wanted to stay angry. Anger was clean. Anger was safe. But underneath it was something more dangerous, the grief she'd never let herself feel, the love she'd never quite killed. You don't get to do this, she whispered. You don't get to show up with your tragic backstory and your protective instincts and expect me to I don't expect anything. Joseph's hand moved toward her face, then stopped, hovering. I know what I am now, Margaret. I know what I've done. But right now, I need to get you somewhere safe, and then I need to fix your car so you can go back to your perfect life and forget this ever happened. Forget? She laughed, bitter and broken. You think I can forget? I tried for 10 years, Joseph. It didn't work. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe. Or hunger. The car, she said abruptly, needing distance, needing air. You said you could fix it? Joseph blinked, recalibrating. Back to business. Back to the problem with a solution. Not here. But I have a place. 20 minutes north. Garage tools, everything we need. He paused. And it's off-grid. No one knows about it except your criminal associates. Except me. His voice was firm. It's clean, Margaret. I promise. Your promises don't mean much anymore. The words landed like a slap. Joseph absorbed them without flinching, but she saw the impact in his eyes. Good. She wanted him to hurt. Wanted him to feel even a fraction of what she'd carried. Fair enough, he said, but it's still the best option you have. Margaret stared out at the rain-soaked darkness. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to call someone, to take back control. But who would she call? The police? And tell them what? That she was running from mobsters with her ex-boyfriend, the crime lord? Her board would have her removed by Tuesday. And there was something else. Something she didn't want to examine too closely. A part of her, the part that had never stopped being 22 and in love, wanted to go with him. Wanted to see where he lived, how he'd survived, what he'd become in all those lost years. Fine, she said. Fix my car. Then I never want to see you again. Joseph put the SUV in gear, and she caught the smallest, saddest smile on his face. Yeah, he said softly. I've been telling myself that for a decade too. The engine roared to life, carrying them deeper into the storm, and Margaret realized that some breakdowns couldn't be fixed with new parts and grease-stained hands. Some required going back to where everything fell apart in the first place. If you could choose safety without love or love with danger, which would you take? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for the next part of the story. The dirt road curved through dense forest, trees closing in like walls on either side. Margaret gripped the door handle as Joseph navigated with the kind of precision that came from muscle memory, from having driven this route in darkness more times than she wanted to imagine. His phone buzzed again. Not a ring, a specific vibration pattern that made his entire body tense. "You need to get that?" Margaret asked, her voice sharp with residual anger and something else she wouldn't name. Joseph's jaw tightened. He didn't reach for the phone. "It's handled." "That's not what your face says." The phone buzzed again. Longer this time. More insistent. "Joseph." He yanked the phone from his pocket and answered without putting it on speaker. "I'm busy." Margaret couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she could see Joseph's reaction. The way his knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The muscle that jumped in his cheek. The single, quiet curse that slipped out before he could stop it. "How many?" he asked. "Then, where?" A pause. "No. Absolutely not. You tell Dimitri that I don't care what protocol says." "I'm not." He stopped listening. His eyes cut to Margaret for just a second, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. Fear. Real, undisguised fear. "Understood," Joseph said flatly. "Give me 2 hours." He ended the call and threw the phone onto the dashboard like it had burned him. "What's wrong?" Margaret heard herself ask. "Nothing you need to worry about. You're a terrible liar. You always were." Joseph's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Yeah, well, I've had to get better at a lot of things." He took a turn too fast, and the SUV fishtailed slightly before he corrected. "The men following us? They weren't random. They were sent." "Sent by who?" "People I do business with. People who don't appreciate when I go off script." He glanced at her again, and this time there was something like apology in his eyes. "They saw you, Margaret. When I stopped to help you. They have photos by now. Facial recognition. Your name. Your company. Everything." The words took a moment to land. When they did, Margaret felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "What does that mean?" But she already knew. She'd watched enough crime dramas, read enough thrillers during sleepless nights in hotel rooms between acquisitions. "It means you're not just a stranded motorist I helped anymore. You're a liability." Joseph's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the rage underneath. "It means they're going to want to know who you are to me. Why I deviated from my route. Why I risked exposure for some random CEO. But I'm not." Margaret stopped. "I'm not anything to you. Not anymore." We both know that's not true. The confession hung between them, heavy and impossible. Margaret's mind raced through implications, through scenarios, through the carefully constructed life she'd built that was now crumbling in real time. "The merger," she breathed. "If this gets out, if there's even a whisper that I'm connected to," she pressed her hands to her temples. "Richard Chin will use this. He'll destroy me. The board will vote me out before I can even explain." "I know. You know?" Her voice rose. "You know? Joseph, this is my entire life. Everything I've worked for, I said I know." He slammed his palm against the steering wheel, and Margaret flinched. Immediately, his expression softened. "I'm sorry. He took a breath. "I'm trying to figure out how to fix this." "You can't fix this. You can't just patch up my reputation like it's a blown radiator hose." "Margaret, no." She was spiraling now, all the control she'd maintained for hours finally shattering. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I built walls. This is why I don't let people in, why I don't trust, her voice cracked. Why I spent 10 years making sure I'd never be vulnerable again." Joseph pulled the SUV to a stop. They were in another clearing, this one barely visible through the rain. He turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes was devastating. "You think I don't know what I've cost you," he said quietly. "You think I don't lie awake at night cataloging every way I've ruined your life? First by leaving. Now by coming back." He reached toward her, then stopped himself. "But I couldn't drive past you on that highway, Margaret. I couldn't leave you stranded. And when I saw those cars coming, you should have," she whispered. "You should have kept driving. And let them take you? Question you? Use you to get to me." He shook his head. "Not in this lifetime. Not in any lifetime." "So what? You've appointed yourself my protector now, after 10 years of silence. I've been protecting you for 10 years, Joseph said, and the exhaustion in his voice was profound. You just didn't know it. Every business deal that went suspiciously smooth. Every competitor who suddenly backed off. Every threat that never quite materialized. He met her eyes. Did you really think you built that empire completely on your own? Margaret felt like she'd been punched. No, you didn't. I cleared obstacles. Nothing more. The success was all you. His voice gentled. But yeah, Margaret. I've had people watching. Making sure no one touched you. Making sure you stayed safe in your perfect corporate tower while He stopped himself. While you what? While I made sure my world never came anywhere near yours. He picked up his phone again, staring at it like it was a grenade. Until tonight. What did they say? Margaret asked. On the phone. What do they want? Joseph was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. They want a meeting. Tomorrow. They want to know who you are and why you matter. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were dark with something that looked like grief. And if I don't convince them you're nobody, that you mean nothing to me, they'll come after me anyway, Margaret finished. Yeah. The rain continued its assault on the roof. Margaret's entire world had narrowed to this moment, this man, this impossible situation. So lie to them, she said. Tell them I was just a stranger. Tell them, they already know I'm lying. Joseph's smile was bitter. I stopped for you, Margaret. I saved you. In my world, that means something. And they're going to keep digging until they figure out what. Margaret's world had become impossibly small. The SUV. The rain. Joseph's profile in the dashboard light. And the suffocating realization that her carefully controlled life had just been set on fire. How long, she asked. Until the meeting? Until they come for me. Joseph checked his watch. 18 hours. Maybe less if they get impatient. He put the SUV back in gear. Which is why we need to move. The safe house is 10 minutes from here. We get there, I make some calls, and we figure this out. Figure it out, Margaret repeated numbly. Right. Like this is just another problem to solve. Another quarterly obstacle. It is a problem. And I will solve it. How? She turned on him. How exactly do you plan to convince a bunch of mobsters that I'm nobody when you just risked everything to save me? When you've apparently been manipulating my business deals for a decade. I haven't been manipulating semantics, Joseph. You've been involved in my life without my knowledge or consent. That's manipulation. Her voice rose. God, is anything I've accomplished actually mine? Or has it all been you pulling strings in the background like some kind of criminal fairy godfather? That's not fair. Fair. Margaret laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged even to her own ears. You want to talk about fair? Nothing about this is fair. Nothing about us has ever been fair. Joseph's hands tightened on the wheel. You want to know how I became a boss? You want the whole ugly story? Yes, she said. I think I've earned that much. He was quiet for a moment, navigating another series of turns that took them deeper into woods that seemed endless. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, like he was watching his own life from the outside. My father died on a Tuesday, he began. 3 days after I told you I loved you. 3 days after I started looking at rings I couldn't afford. He glanced at her. Did you know that? That I was going to propose? Margaret's breath caught. No. Yeah. Well, I was 23 and stupid and so in love with you I couldn't think straight. A muscle worked in his jaw. Then my uncle called. Said my father had been killed in a business dispute. Said I needed to come to the family house immediately. The SUV broke through the tree line into another clearing. This one had a structure, a cabin, small and dark, tucked against the hillside like it was trying to disappear. Joseph killed the engine, but didn't move to get out. He just sat there, staring at nothing, lost in a memory that clearly still had teeth. When I got there, my sister was tied to a chair, he continued. 15 years old. Crying so hard she could barely breathe. And my uncle, my father's own brother, had a gun to her head. His voice went flat. He said the organization needed continuity. That my father's death left a power vacuum. That I could either step up and take his place, or he'd eliminate the entire bloodline and start fresh. Jesus, Margaret whispered. I had 20 seconds to decide. Be a boss or watch my sister die. Joseph finally turned to look at her. What would you have chosen? Margaret couldn't answer. Couldn't speak past the horror of it. So I said yes, Joseph said. And I've been saying yes every day since. To things that would make you sick. To choices that turned me into exactly what I swore I'd never become. He reached for the door handle. You asked how I became a boss, Margaret. That's how. Not ambition. Not greed. Just love for someone I couldn't save any other way. Your sister, Margaret said. Where is she now? Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. Medical school. Stanford. She doesn't talk to me anymore. Doesn't want anything to do with this life. He paused. I don't blame her. Margaret's anger was still there, but it was complicated now by understanding. By the terrible recognition that she might have made the same choice. That love could turn anyone into a monster if the stakes were high enough. You could have told me, she said quietly. After. You could have explained. And dragged you into this? Joseph shook his head. You had a future, Margaret. A real one. I wasn't going to let my family's poison touch you. So instead you just disappeared and let me think. She stopped, remembering those first months. The panic. The certainty that something terrible had happened. Then the slow, agonizing acceptance that he'd simply chosen to leave. I thought you didn't love me anymore. I thought I wasn't enough. God, no. Joseph's voice cracked. You were everything. You are everything. That's the problem. The rain had softened to a drizzle. In the distance, Margaret could hear night birds calling, oblivious to the human drama unfolding in their forest. I need to know something, she said. The truth. No more protecting me from information. Okay. These people who are coming. This meeting tomorrow. What happens if you can't convince them I'm nobody? Joseph's silence was answer enough. They'll kill me, Margaret said. Not a question. They'll try. His eyes met hers, and they were blazing with something fierce and unbreakable. Which is why that's not going to happen. I didn't keep you safe for 10 years just to lose you now. You can't fight your whole organization. Watch me. Joseph, no. He opened his door, stepping out into the drizzle. I've made a lot of choices I regret, Margaret. But protecting you will never be one of them. So you can hate me, you can curse me, you can spend the rest of your life never forgiving me. But you're going to spend the rest of your life doing it. I promise you that. He came around to her side and opened her door, offering his hand like a gentleman from another era. Like the boy who used to walk her home from the docks, his calloused palm warm against hers. Margaret stared at that hand. 10 years ago, she would have taken it without hesitation. Now she knew what it was, the hand of a killer, a criminal, a man who'd done things she couldn't even imagine. But it was also the hand of someone who'd sacrificed everything for the people he loved. She took it. Joseph's fingers closed around hers, and the shock of contact after so many years nearly undid her. He helped her out of the SUV, and for a moment they stood there in the rain, their hands still clasped, the cabin waiting like a question neither of them knew how to answer. Inside, Joseph said quietly, "We have a lot to figure out before morning." Margaret followed him toward the door, still holding his hand, and wondered if either of them would survive what came next. Can someone who's done terrible things for the right reasons ever truly be redeemed? Share your thoughts below. This story needs your voice. The cabin was smaller than Margaret expected. One room, mostly, with a kitchenette tucked into the corner and a door that presumably led to a bathroom. But it was clean, surprisingly so, and warm. Joseph moved to a panel on the wall and flipped several switches, bringing soft light to the space. "There's a generator," he said, not looking at her. "Solar panels on the roof. It's completely off-grid. No one can trace." The window exploded. Glass shattered inward as Margaret screamed, and Joseph was on her in an instant, tackling her to the floor behind the kitchen counter. His body covered hers completely, one hand cradling her head against his chest as bullets tore through the cabin walls like they were paper. "Stay down," he shouted over the gunfire. Margaret couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. Her entire body was frozen, her mind unable to process that this was real, that people were actually shooting at them, that she was going to die in a cabin in the woods with her ex-boyfriend while her board of directors waited for Monday's presentation. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it started. Joseph lifted his head slightly, listening. Margaret could feel his heart hammering against her cheek, could smell gun oil and rain and something underneath that was just him, unchanged after all these years. "How many cars did you see?" he whispered. "What?" "When we pulled in. How many sets of headlights behind us?" Margaret's mind struggled to focus. I don't know. 2? Maybe 3? Damn it. Joseph shifted, reaching for something at his back. When his hand came away, he was holding a gun. Black, compact, deadly efficient. They followed us from the highway. I thought I lost them, but another spray of bullets cut him off. These came from a different angle, taking out the remaining windows. Joseph pulled Margaret tighter against him, his body a shield she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "The SUV," he said. "We need to get to the SUV." "Are you insane? They'll shoot us the second we move. They're going to breach the cabin in about 30 seconds. His eyes met hers, fierce and certain. "I can get you out. But you have to trust me." Trust. The word was laughable. She didn't trust him. Couldn't trust him. He'd proven 10 years ago that he made choices without her, that he decided what she could handle, that a door splintered somewhere behind them. Men's voices, speaking rapid Russian. Joseph's face went hard. "Margaret, do you trust me?" She thought of her corner office. Her reputation. The merger that was supposed to close next week. Everything she'd built on the foundation of not needing anyone, of never being vulnerable again. "Yes," she heard herself say. Joseph smiled, actually smiled, quick and devastating. "On 3. We go out the back window, straight to the SUV. Stay behind me. Don't stop for anything." "There's a back window?" 1. He tensed, ready to move. 2. The front door crashed open. Men poured in, silhouettes backlit by vehicle headlights. 3. Joseph exploded upward, firing twice at the overhead light and plunging the cabin into darkness. Then he was pulling Margaret toward the back wall, toward a window she hadn't even noticed. He kicked it out in one smooth motion and lifted her through like she weighed nothing. She landed in mud and rain, her Armani suit completely ruined, her heels gone somewhere in the chaos. Joseph came through the window behind her, already moving, his hand locked around her wrist. "Run." They ran. Margaret had never run like this in her life. Not in college track. Not even in her nightmares. This was pure survival, her body moving on instinct and adrenaline while her mind screamed that this couldn't be happening, that CEOs didn't get shot at, that her life was spreadsheets and shareholder meetings, not bullets and blood. Behind them, men shouted. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Joseph yanked open the SUV's driver door and practically threw her across the console into the passenger seat. The engine roared to life before she'd even closed her door. "Seatbelt," he said, and then they were moving. The SUV launched forward, tires spraying mud and gravel. Margaret caught a glimpse of the men behind them, 4, maybe 5, all armed, all running for their vehicles. Then Joseph cut the wheel hard, and they were on what barely qualified as a road, branches scraping the sides of the SUV like fingernails. Where Margaret started. "Hold on." The SUV burst out of the woods onto a paved road, and Joseph didn't slow down. He accelerated, pushing the vehicle to speeds that made Margaret's stomach lurch. Behind them, headlights appeared. 2 sets. Then 3. Joseph's face was completely calm. This was his world, Margaret realized. This was what he'd become in the 10 years since he'd held her and promised her a future that didn't include running for their lives. "I need you to do something for me," he said, his voice steady despite the speedometer climbing past 90. "What?" "Glove box. There's a phone. Burner. Call the second number in the contacts." Margaret fumbled the glove box open with shaking hands. The phone was there, simple and black. She found the contact list. The second number had no name, just a single letter. D. "What do I say?" "Tell them Gilbert needs an exit. Route 9, northbound. 5 minutes." She made the call. A man answered on the first ring, no greeting, just silence, waiting for information. "Gilbert needs an exit," Margaret said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Route 9, northbound. 5 minutes. Confirmed, the man said, and hung up. Joseph took a turn that made the SUV's tires scream. The pursuing vehicles followed, relentless. One of them pulled alongside, and Margaret saw the passenger window rolling down. Down! Joseph shouted. She ducked as bullets shattered the driver's side window. Joseph didn't flinch, didn't slow. He just reached up with his left hand, gun appearing like magic, and fired 3 times. The pursuing vehicle's windshield spiderwebbed and it fell back, swerving wildly. How many left? Joseph asked. Margaret risked a look. 2. Maybe, oh God, 3 more just appeared. Yeah, they called for backup. Joseph's jaw tightened. Hold on. He cut across 3 lanes of highway. When had they gotten back to the highway, and took an exit ramp at a speed that defied physics. The SUV went up on 2 wheels for a heart-stopping second before crashing back down. Margaret's entire world was reduced to motion and terror, and the man beside her who drove like he was dancing with death and knew all the steps. There, Joseph said. Ahead, parked under an overpass, was a semi-truck. Its trailer doors were open, a ramp extended. You have got to be kidding me, Margaret breathed. Joseph aimed the SUV straight for the ramp. This is the exit. Joseph, they hit the ramp at 60 miles per hour. The SUV flew up into the trailer, and immediately the doors began closing behind them. Margaret heard the pursuing vehicles scream past, their drivers not realizing their prey had just vanished. The truck started moving before the SUV had even stopped rocking. Joseph killed the engine. In the sudden silence, Margaret could hear both of them breathing hard, could smell gunpowder and burnt rubber and fear. You okay? Joseph asked. Margaret looked at him, really looked at him. Blood ran from a cut on his temple. His shirt was torn. His hands were still rock steady on the wheel. No, she said. I'm really, really not okay. And then, to her absolute horror, she started laughing. Great, gasping, hysterical laughs that turned into sobs that turned into something she couldn't name. Joseph reached for her, and she didn't pull away. She let him gather her against his chest while she fell apart, while her perfect, controlled world shattered completely, while the Ice Queen melted in the arms of the monster who'd loved her enough to become one. I've got you, he whispered into her hair. I've got you, Margaret. I promise. And despite everything, despite the lies and the lost years and the bullets that had just tried to end her life, she believed him. The semi-truck drove for what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes. Margaret stayed pressed against Joseph's chest, her tears drying into shocked silence, while he held her with the kind of gentleness that shouldn't have been possible from hands that had just killed a man. When the truck finally stopped, the trailer doors opened to reveal a warehouse. Empty except for shadows and the echo of their breathing. Out, said a voice from the darkness. The same voice from the phone. You've got 12 hours before this location is compromised. Joseph helped Margaret down from the trailer, his hand steady on her waist. The truck doors closed immediately, and then it was gone, leaving them alone in the vast space. This way, Joseph said, leading her toward a corner where a metal staircase climbed to a second level. Up top was an office that had been converted into something like living quarters. A couch, a table, concrete floor, and bulletproof glass. Margaret stood in the center of the room, hugging herself, trying to process that an hour ago she'd been in a cabin in the woods, and now she was in an undisclosed warehouse having survived a gunfight. Her suit was destroyed. Her hair was a disaster. She was pretty sure she'd lost both shoes somewhere between the first shooting and the semi-truck. The Ice Queen, Forbes had called her. The woman who never cracked. She was cracking now. There's a bathroom through there, Joseph said quietly. Hot water. Clean clothes in the locker. They'll be too big, but why? The word came out raw. Joseph stopped. Why what? Why did you really leave me? Margaret turned to face him, and all the adrenaline and fear and confusion crystallized into pure rage. And don't tell me it was to protect me. Don't give me the tragic backstory about your father and your sister and your impossible choice. Tell me the truth, Joseph. The real truth. That is the truth. Bullshit. She advanced on him, and to his credit, he didn't back away. You want to know what I think? I think you were looking for an excuse. I think your father's death gave you the perfect out from a relationship that was getting too real, too serious, to stop. You were going to propose, she continued, relentless. You said so yourself. But then you didn't have to, did you? Because suddenly you had this noble reason to disappear. This tragic obligation that meant you could leave without being the bad guy. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Margaret was shouting now, 10 years of grief and anger finally erupting. Because the Joseph I knew wouldn't have just vanished. He wouldn't have made that choice without at least saying goodbye. He wouldn't have let me think I meant nothing, you meant everything. Joseph's voice cracked like thunder. God, Margaret, you meant everything and that's why I had to go. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. He ran both hands through his hair, and she could see him trembling. You were going to Stanford. You had that scholarship, that future. You were going to be something incredible, and I was a dock worker's son with a high school diploma and a family legacy of violence. I didn't care about any of that. I know. That's the problem. Joseph paced away from her, then back, caged energy and decade-old pain. You would have stayed for me. You would have given up Stanford, given up your dreams, and followed me into this hell because you loved me that much. And I couldn't, his voice broke. I couldn't let you do that. Margaret stared at him. So you made the choice for me? Yes. You decided what I wanted. What I could handle. Yes. You arrogant, self-righteous, she shoved him hard. He barely moved. You don't get to do that. You don't get to decide what's best for me. I was 23 and terrified and so in love with you I couldn't breathe. Joseph caught her wrists as she tried to shove him again. My father was dead. My sister was traumatized. My uncle was telling me I had to become a killer or watch everyone I loved die. And you, he pulled her closer, his eyes blazing. You were the only pure thing in my life. The only good thing. And I was about to poison it. So you just cut me out completely. I tried to call, he said quietly. That first week. I picked up the phone 100 times. But what was I going to say? Sorry, I can't see you anymore because I just killed 3 men and I'm taking over my father's criminal empire. Margaret's breath caught. You killed my uncle, Joseph said flatly. And his 2 bodyguards. The night after he threatened my sister. I put bullets in all 3 of them and took control of the organization before anyone could stop me. His hands were still around her wrists, gentle despite the horror of what he was saying. That's who I became, Margaret. That's who I am. A murderer. A criminal. Everything you should have never touched. She should have been afraid. Should have pulled away. But all she felt was grief for the boy he'd been, the one who'd been forced to make impossible choices with no good options. You should have told me, she whispered. And dragged you into it? Yes, because I would have understood. I would have, she stopped, because she didn't know what she would have done. At 22, she'd been idealistic and in love, but would she really have been able to handle the truth? I would have at least known you didn't just stop loving me. Joseph's laugh was broken. Stop loving you? Margaret, I never stopped. Not for 1 day. Not for 1 hour. He let go of her wrists and stepped back, putting distance between them like it physically hurt. I've followed your career like it was my religion. Every article. Every interview. Every time you appeared on CNBC I watched. Every award you won, I celebrated alone in whatever safe house I was hiding in. That's not love, Margaret said. That's obsession. Maybe. I don't know the difference anymore. He turned away from her. But I do know that I've spent 10 years making sure you were safe. Making sure no one from my world ever touched yours. Making sure you got to be the incredible thing I always knew you'd become. By manipulating my business deals. By removing obstacles that had nothing to do with your talent. His voice was firm. I never gave you anything you didn't earn, Margaret. I just made sure the game wasn't rigged against you. She wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier than this complicated mess of understanding and grief, and the terrible recognition that in his position, she might have done the same thing. I hate that you left, she said finally. I know. I hate that you didn't trust me enough to let me choose. I know. And I hate that even now, after everything, she stopped, unable to finish. Joseph turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes was devastating. Still what? Margaret crossed the space between them before she could think better of it. Before logic could intervene. Before the Ice Queen could reassert control. She kissed him. It was angry and desperate and tasted like tears and 10 years of longing. Joseph froze for half a second, shocked, and then his arms came around her, and he was kissing her back with the kind of hunger that felt like drowning and salvation at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Margaret pressed her forehead against his chest. "I still love you," she whispered. "God help me, I still love you." Joseph's arms tightened around her. "I'm so sorry," he said into her hair. "For all of it. For leaving. For the choices I made. For being too much of a coward to tell you the truth." "You're not a coward." Margaret pulled back to look at him. "You're an idiot. But not a coward." His smile was small and sad. "I can live with that." They stood there in the warehouse office, holding each other while the night stretched on outside. Two people from different worlds who'd loved each other once and maybe, impossibly, dangerously, still did. "What happens now?" Margaret asked. Joseph's expression went serious. "Now I fix this. I meet with them tomorrow. I convince them you're nothing to me. By lying. By doing whatever it takes to keep you safe." He cupped her face in his hands. "That's all that matters, Margaret. Your safety. Your life. Everything else is just details." She should have argued. Should have insisted on being part of the solution. But she was exhausted and terrified and still feeling the ghost of his kiss on her lips. "Okay," she said. "But Joseph." "Yeah. After this is over. After you fix it. We're going to have a very long conversation about partnership and trust and making decisions together." His smile was real this time. "I'd expect nothing less from the Ice Queen. Don't call me that." "What should I call you?" Margaret thought about it. About who she'd been before and who she was now. About the woman she'd become in his absence and the girl she'd been in his presence. "Just call me yours," she said quietly. And for the first time in 10 years, Joseph Gilbert looked like he might actually believe in something good. They sat on the warehouse floor with their backs against the wall, shoulders touching, sharing silence like a language they'd both forgotten and just remembered. Margaret had showered and changed into clothes from the locker, sweatpants, and a t-shirt that hung on her like a tent. Joseph had cleaned the cut on his temple and discarded his ruined shirt, leaving him in a black undershirt that showed arms more muscled than she remembered. He looked like what he was now. Dangerous. Hardened. Nothing like the boy who'd saved tip money to buy her flowers. But his hand found hers in the dark, and his fingers laced through hers exactly the way they used to, and Margaret felt 22 again. "Tell me about the first deal," she said quietly. Joseph was silent for a moment. "The first deal I fixed for you?" "Yeah." He exhaled slowly. "You were 24. Just out of Stanford. Working for that venture capital firm in San Francisco, Morrison and Associates." I remember. She'd been so proud of that job. So certain she was finally building something real. "You were analyzing a tech startup. Some kid with a revolutionary algorithm and no business sense. Your bosses wanted to lowball him, squeeze him for everything and give him nothing." Joseph's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "You wrote a memo saying it was predatory. That the deal should be fair or you'd walk." Margaret did remember that. She'd almost been fired for it. "They were going to let you go," Joseph continued. "Had the paperwork ready. But then the startup's lawyer suddenly withdrew from the negotiations. And a new lawyer showed up, one who happened to owe my organization a very large favor." His voice was carefully neutral. "The deal got restructured. Fair terms. The kid got his funding. You got credit for the save. Your bosses kept you on. That was you. That was me." Margaret didn't know how to feel. Grateful? Angry? Both at once? "There were others," Joseph said. "Not many. Maybe a dozen over the years. Times when you were facing obstacles that had nothing to do with your talent. Competitors who were planning to sabotage your presentations. Board members who were taking bribes to vote against you. Once, a journalist who was going to run a hit piece based on fabricated sources. What happened to the journalist? He got a better story. Corruption in city planning. Won a Pulitzer for it." Joseph's smile was grim. "I'm not a complete monster, Margaret. I just redirected his attention to people who actually deserved the exposure. She should have been furious. Should have felt violated. But underneath the shock was something else, a terrible understanding of what this meant. "You've been watching me for 10 years, she said slowly. Protecting me. Clearing my path. Only when it was necessary. Only when you were trying to make up for leaving." The realization hit her like cold water. All those years, you were trying to give me the future you thought you'd stolen. Joseph didn't deny it. Margaret pulled her hand away and turned to face him. "And I spent all those years trying to prove I didn't need you. That I could build an empire on my own. That I was fine without you. You were fine. You're fine." "No, Joseph. I'm not." The admission hurt, but it was also relief. Finally saying the truth she'd been running from for a decade. "I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that didn't hurt. I made myself into the Ice Queen because feeling nothing was easier than feeling everything. Every acquisition, every deal, every boardroom victory. I was trying to fill a hole that you left." "Margaret, let me finish." She took a shaky breath. "I told myself I was building something that mattered. That my success meant I'd won. That I'd proven I didn't need anyone." Tears pricked her eyes. "But the truth is, I've been alone for 10 years. Completely, utterly alone. I have employees and board members and people who fear me, but I don't have anyone who knows me. Not really." "That's not true." "It is true. I made it true." Margaret wiped her eyes angrily. "You want to know why I was fleeing that board meeting? Why I was driving too fast on an empty highway at midnight?" Joseph waited. "Because I won. Again. I destroyed Richard Chen's attempt to oust me. I secured the merger. I proved I was untouchable." Her voice cracked. "And the only thing I felt was empty. Completely, devastatingly empty. So I got in my car and drove because at least the motion felt like something." She laughed, bitter and broken. "The Ice Queen. That's what they call me. Like it's a compliment. Like being cold and unreachable is something to aspire to. But you know what it really is? It's armor. It's what I built to make sure I'd never hurt like I did when you left." "I'm sorry," Joseph said, and his voice was wrecked. "God, Margaret, I'm so sorry. I know you are. I know you thought you were doing the right thing. Protecting me from your world, giving me the chance to succeed on my own." She met his eyes. "But you didn't protect me, Joseph. You just changed what hurt me." The words hung between them, brutal and true. "I don't know how to fix this," Joseph said finally. "Any of it. I can handle the people coming after us. I can make deals, eliminate threats, do whatever it takes to keep you physically safe. But this," he gestured helplessly between them. "I don't know how to fix what I broke." Margaret thought about it. About 10 years of walls and loneliness and success that tasted like ashes. About the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, and whether there was any way to bridge the gap between them. "Maybe you can't," she said quietly. "Maybe I can't either. Maybe we're both too broken, too changed by what happened." Joseph's expression shuddered, and she could see him preparing to accept it. To let her go. Again. "But maybe," she continued, "we don't need to fix the past. Maybe we just need to decide what we want the future to look like." Hope flickered in his eyes, fragile and dangerous. "What do you want?" he asked. Margaret thought about her corner office and her perfect reputation and the life she'd built brick by brick from the ruins of her heart. Then she thought about sitting on this warehouse floor with Joseph's shoulder against hers, feeling more seen and known than she had in 10 years. "I want to stop running," she said. "From the past. From feelings. From the fact that I never stopped loving you even when I hated you." She reached for his hand again. "I want to figure out if there's a way for your world and mine to coexist without destroying each other. That's dangerous. Everything worth having is dangerous." She smiled, and it felt real for the first time in years. "You taught me that. Back when we were kids who thought love was enough to conquer anything." "Love isn't enough," Joseph said. "Not in my world." "Maybe not. But it's a start." Margaret squeezed his hand. "You said you have a meeting tomorrow. With the people who want to know who I am." "Yeah, so tell them." Joseph's eyes widened. "Margaret, tell them I'm the woman you love. The woman you've always loved. And tell them that if they want to come after me, they'll have to go through you." Her voice was steady, certain. "No more hiding. No more protecting me from the truth. We face this together, or we don't face it at all. They could kill you. They could kill you too. That's the point. She turned to face him fully. I spent 10 years being safe and alone. I'm done with that. I'd rather be in danger with you than safe without you. Joseph stared at her like she'd just offered him salvation and damnation in the same breath. You have no idea what you're saying. What it would mean to be connected to me publicly. Your career, your reputation, are built on a foundation of loneliness and fear. Margaret's voice was fierce. Maybe it's time to build something new. Something real. The board will destroy you. Let them try. She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. I didn't become the Ice Queen by backing down from fights. I just forgot what was worth fighting for. Joseph pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like he was trying to shield her from the whole world. You're insane, he murmured into her hair. Probably. This is going to get ugly. I expect nothing less. Your life is never going to be the same. Margaret pulled back to look at him. Good. Because my life has been perfect and empty for too long. I'm ready for messy and real. And when Joseph kissed her this time, it felt like a promise. Like a deal being struck between the Ice Queen and the Mafia King, that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Even if it destroyed them both. Is it braver to protect someone by leaving them, or to stay and face the danger together? Subscribe to find out how their impossible choice reshapes everything. Morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. Margaret woke on the warehouse couch with Joseph's jacket draped over her like a blanket, the scent of him surrounding her, leather and gunpowder, and something underneath that was just memory. He was across the room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Russian that sounded both fluid and deadly. He looked different in daylight. Harder. The shadows under his eyes spoke of a night spent making calls, planning moves, orchestrating whatever deal would keep her alive. When he noticed her awake, he ended the call abruptly. It's done, he said. Margaret sat up, her body aching from the previous night's chaos. What's done? The meeting. The threat. Joseph crossed to her, and despite the exhaustion etched into his face, there was something like triumph in his eyes. I called in every favor I had. Made promises I'll probably regret. But they've agreed to leave you alone. Just like that. Not just like that. He sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched. I gave them something they wanted more than leverage over me. Information on a rival organization. 3 years of intelligence I'd been saving for exactly this kind of situation. Margaret's stomach twisted. What will they do with it? Nothing you need to worry about. His voice was firm. But it was enough. You're off limits now. Officially untouchable. She should have felt relief. Instead, all she felt was the weight of what it had cost him. Joseph, your car's fixed too, he interrupted, like he couldn't bear her gratitude. Had it towed to a private garage last night. New radiator hose, full diagnostic, detailed. It's waiting at your building. He smiled slightly. Figured the Ice Queen shouldn't show up to work in a borrowed SUV. Work. The word felt foreign. Margaret checked the time, 6:30 a.m. In 3 hours, she had a presentation to the board. The merger approval. The thing she'd been working toward for 6 months. It felt like it belonged to a different life. I should go, she said, but she didn't move. Neither did Joseph. They sat there in the gray morning light, the warehouse quiet around them, both knowing this was the moment. The choice. The place where their two worlds either collided or separated forever. Come with me, Margaret said suddenly. Joseph's eyes widened. What? To the office. To the presentation. The idea crystallized as she spoke, reckless and perfect. I'm tired of hiding. Tired of pretending I'm not connected to you. So come with me. Sit in the back of the boardroom. Let them see that the Ice Queen has a weakness. Margaret, that's career suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the first honest thing I've done in 10 years. She took his hand. You said you wanted to fix the rest. So fix it. Not by disappearing again. Not by protecting me from the shadows. But by being there. Publicly. Undeniably. Your board will lose their minds. Good. They're overdue for some chaos. Margaret's smile was fierce. Besides, Richard Chin has been trying to paint me as cold and unfeeling for months. Let's give him something real to work with. Joseph studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. You know what you're asking? The moment I walk into that building, every law enforcement agency with an active investigation on me will know. Your company will be under scrutiny. Your reputation will finally be based on truth instead of carefully constructed lies. Margaret stood, pulling him up with her. I'm done being safe, Joseph. Done being alone. If loving you means my career implodes, then at least I'll go down fighting for something real. You're insane, he said, but he was smiling. You've mentioned that. The board will vote you out. Let them try. She straightened her borrowed clothes with as much dignity as she could muster. I've survived worse. I survived losing you once. Everything else is just details. Joseph's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression shifted. Your car's out front. Driver 2. He'll take you wherever you want to go. And you. I have some things to handle first. Loose ends from last night. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black phone. But take this. Burner. My number's the only one programmed in. Margaret took the phone, their fingers brushing. The contact sent electricity up her arm, the same as it always had. When this is over, Joseph said quietly, when you've had time to think clearly, away from the adrenaline and the fear, if you change your mind about us, about any of this, I'll understand. I'll disappear again. Completely this time. Joseph, I mean it, Margaret. I won't manipulate your business deals. Won't watch from the shadows. I'll give you the clean break I should have given you 10 years ago. She looked at him, this man who'd become a monster to save his sister, who'd loved her from a distance for a decade, who'd risked everything to keep her safe. The boy from the docks was still in there somewhere, buried under scar tissue and hard choices. I'm not going to change my mind, she said. You don't know that. I do. Margaret stepped closer, her hand finding his chest, feeling his heartbeat under her palm. Because I've spent 10 years trying to forget you, and it didn't work. I've had success and power and everything I thought I wanted, and none of it filled the space you left. So no, Joseph. I'm not going to change my mind. He pulled her against him then, his kiss desperate and grateful and tinged with disbelief. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Margaret could see tears in his eyes. I don't deserve you, he said. Probably not. She smiled. But you're stuck with me anyway. The drive to her office building took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Margaret sat in the back of the town car, wearing borrowed clothes, carrying a burner phone, with the taste of Joseph still on her lips. She should have been planning her presentation. Instead, she was planning a revolution. Her assistant nearly fainted when Margaret walked into the lobby looking like she'd survived a natural disaster. Ms. Alston, we've been trying to reach you all night. Your car was reported abandoned and it's handled, Jennifer. Margaret's voice was calm. Is the boardroom ready? Yes, but your clothes. Send someone to get me a suit from the executive closet, size 6. And Jennifer. Margaret turned, her smile sharp. Clear a seat in the back of the boardroom. I'm expecting a guest. She spent the next 2 hours preparing. Showering in the executive bathroom. Running through her presentation. Fielding concerned calls from board members about her incident on the highway. She told them nothing except that she was fine and the meeting would proceed as scheduled. At 9:55, Margaret stood outside the boardroom in a perfectly tailored navy suit, her hair sleek, her makeup flawless. The Ice Queen returned. Except this time, she wasn't wearing armor. She was wearing truth. The boardroom doors opened. 12 members of her board sat around the table, Richard Chin prominent among them, already smiling like he smelled blood. And in the back corner, in a chair that shouldn't have been there, sat Joseph Gilbert. He'd cleaned up, changed into a dark suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. But he still looked dangerous. Still looked like exactly what he was. The room went silent. Ms. Alston, Richard Chin said slowly, his eyes fixed on Joseph. Is there something you'd like to share with the board? Margaret took her place at the head of the table. Set down her presentation materials. Met Joseph's eyes across the room and saw him nod once. Permission. Support. Love. Actually, Richard, there is. Margaret's voice was steady. But first, let's talk about the Hartley merger. I believe you'll find the terms are even better than projected. She clicked to the first slide and began to dismantle Richard Chen's opposition with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a queen. And in the back of the room, the Mafia king watched his first love reclaim her empire and knew that some engines, once broken, could be rebuilt into something stronger. The presentation took 40 minutes. By the end, even Richard Chen had run out of objections. The merger was approved. Margaret had won. Again, but this time, when she walked out of that boardroom, she wasn't alone. Joseph was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall like he had all the time in the world. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I won." "You always do." He pushed off the wall. "Ready for the hard part?" Margaret thought about the press that would inevitably dig into her personal life. The investigations that would follow. The board members who would demand explanations. The career she'd built that might crumble under scrutiny. Then she thought about 10 years of loneliness. 10 years of empty victories. "I fixed your car, Margaret," Joseph said quietly, echoing words from a lifetime ago. "Now let me fix the rest." She took his hand in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, in front of anyone who cared to look, in front of the entire world. "We fix it together," she said. "Or not at all." And as they walked toward the elevator, toward whatever came next, Margaret Alston realized that sometimes the most powerful deal you could make wasn't in a boardroom. It was with your own heart. Thank you for listening until the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the story. There's another story like the one you just enjoyed on your left screen.